Year 12. What is life without people to share it with? A meaningful life is a tentative thing, built carefully on certain freedoms, such as the freedom of autonomy. Meaningful relationships are essential to an enriched human experience as shown in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for without one cannot attain self-actualization, and thus the quality of life is severely diminished. George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984 is set in Oceania. The ruling party expects absolute loyalty to the INSOC regime and does not tolerate any form of rebellion. Orwell crystallizes that the party has restricted existing loyalties to deter citizens from building meaningful relationships and living a human experience so fulfilling that it overshadows one's love for the regime. As Julia puts it, if you're happy inside yourself, why should you get excited about Big Brother? Christina Doucher's Vox is another dystopian novel in which the oligarchy uses the restriction of autonomy to reduce the likelihood of dissent. The Pure movement has swept across America, and females have been fitted with a metal bracelet that delivers an electric shock if they go over the limit of 100 spoken words a day. The novel is narrated by Jean, a mother of 4, and Doucher, like Orwell, emphasizes the idea that autonomy and private loyalties between families and significant others are threatening to powerful regimes. Both novels are invariably a product of their own context. Orwell's work is cynical and pessimistic in nature, with his anxieties stemming from his time in Burma and Spain, as well as witnessing 2 world wars, the Great Depression and the Cold War, all of which highlighted to him the sheer extent of deception and subjugation experienced by individuals under the authoritarian. In contrast, Doucher's 2018 novel is shaped by the shortcomings of the Trump administration. Although Trump is never mentioned, the illusion is apparent. Vox opens during the administration of the extreme right-wing president elected under the term of America's first black president. Autonomy can be defined as the ability to make choices according to one's own free will. Constant surveillance hinders this freedom, inducing a state of awareness and permanent visibility, altering the behavior of people who are afraid to be seen on a court. This fear of constantly being watched impacts meaningful relationships and the quality of life, because who can live happily if they are constantly moderating behavior out of anxiousness? This is especially true in the world of 1984. Where children are used as a mode of surveillance. It was almost normal for people over 30 to be frightened of their own children. Winston says, echoing the eerily familiar context of Hitler's youth, in which children were indoctrinated and perpetuated the racist and nationalistic ideals propagated by the Nazi regime. Children were used as spies as they were the most impressionable and more likely to follow the collective, seeking to find a place to belong. This worked in the party's favor when they dismantled institutions such as family, replacing a child's private loyalty to their parents with an undying loyalty to Big Brother. Parents of junior spies fail to meaningfully connect with their children as they are hyper-aware of their own behavior and moderate it out of the fear of being denounced. Due to the paranoia and anxiety of being watched, one can certainly posit that the quality of the human experience is poor, owing to the meaningless relationship with their children. The Pure movement in Vox also understands the importance of private loyalties. As her daughter, Sonia, has been silenced with her, Jean tries to make both of their voices heard. However, when her son Stephen pledges his loyalty to the movement, she cannot rebel, not even in her own home. The extent of her son's indoctrination is emphasized when, after being recruited by the movement, Stephen tells Jean, "By the way, I wouldn't encourage Sonia to pick the sign language back up. Signing defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do here." By speaking in a tone that is forthright, sharp, and threatening, Doucher suggests Stephen has minimal, if any, loyalty to his little sister or mother. Doucher's incorporation of inclusive language reaffirms Stephen's meaningful relationship to the movement and its ideals is stronger than his relationship with his family. Doucher employs the use of epithets when Jean refers to Stephen as a goddamn spy kid, amplifying her frustration in fearing her own son, and the fact that he could send his mother and sister to punishment camps because he lacks any private loyalty towards them. Thus, Stephen destroys his relationship with his mother, and in true form, the quality of Jean's human experience is reduced. further accentuating that it is meaningful relationship or lack thereof that determines the quality of one's human experience. Autonomy is also important with regard to sexual relationships. In 1984, Winston's rebellion was political, motivated by a desire for reform, whereas Julia's rebellion was personal and inspired by her impulse to break the rules. Winston, similarly, sexual intercourse was to be looked on as a slightly disgusting minor operation, like having an enema, puts into perspective how the state invaded it and dictated the most private aspects of life. A sexual relationship is important in creating a meaningful relationship, as it provides a unique connection that is innately a part of the human experience. Being deprived of an intimate relationship is unnatural and thus diminishes the quality of one's human experience. After Winston spends time with Julia, he notices that he had grown fatter. His varicose ulcer had subsided, leaving only a brown stain on the skin above his ankle. His fits of coughing in the early morning had stopped. This quote accentuates the notion that meaningful relationships determine the quality of one's human experience. Because once Winston has formed a meaningful relationship with Julia, he rid himself naturally of the physical ailments that negatively impacted the quality of his life. A symbol of Winston's sexual repression, his varicose also heals after he connects with Julia, only to flame again after he is betrayed by O'Brien and separated from Julia, reiterating that meaningful relationships do in fact define the quality of one's human experience. In Vox, autonomous sexual relationships are hindered when the pure movement gives husbands the keys to their wives' freedoms, leaving women with no one to turn to, not their female friends who have been silenced too, or their children, who have been taught to love the regime. Women cannot even have their husbands to share in their misery, as their husbands are in essence the reason for their silence. The pure movement has criminalized the offense of adultery, so women cannot even turn to another in the hopes of easing their loneliness. By this, the control the regime has in demolishing sexual relationships contributes significantly to the reduced quality of a woman's human experience. As Jean now lives a lonely life with a husband and son, both bound by the law to silence her, although adultery has been criminalized, Jean's failing marriage pushes her into the arms of another man, Lorenzo. So I walked out of the Eastern Market and across the sea and got into Lorenzo's car. It was the only method I had of saying fuck you to the government. Jean's rebellion in Vox parallels that of Winston Smith in being political, with this quote emphasizing how a physical rebellion constituted in metaphorically attacking the regime. Jean's affair emphasizes that it is possible